everybody. Hunter Willis, again, your host here with FinOps Fridays. And today we have Kevin Wehde. Kevin, it's a pleasure to work with you, talk with you again today. I've known Kevin for a couple of years now. And Kevin has worked at organizations large and small, but in the biggest part of his career here, he has worked on the operation and finance side of some of the larger enterprise organizations that are out there. He has a ton of experience deploying both TBM and FinOps in those organizations. So, Kevin, really great to be able to pick your brain today and have you on the podcast. Go ahead, just give off your introduction here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Sure. Been in the IT space, as you noted, for several decades, probably 30 plus years. I have a degree in finance, but was always on the IT side of things. So most recently, I was a customer and then moved over to Apptio, which has been a great jump. Um, it was an airline that I previously worked at where I managed the data centers and the cloud transformation, as well as the entire FinOps program once the applications moved out of data centers into cloud.
You and I have had some really amazing conversations about getting organizations to understand the importance of chargeback and showback, or just even kind of any kind of visibility into IT costs, which obviously is what FinOps is all about. But I love hearing, and people that I speak to and customers that we have, as well as at conferences, trade shows, people are always asking about, specific examples and recommendations about how to get, buy-in and processes that you followed in your career to do that. So can you talk to us about just kind of getting started with that buy-in for that visibility into IT costs, which is for so many organizations, the biggest hurdle in getting into being able to have a mature FinOps practice, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. I think the most important thing starting off, and this drove the success at my previous employer, we did about a month and a half org change management assessment. Um, if you look at why the org change management assessment, in a traditional IT shop, we're used to running everything on-prem. It's more of a set it and forget it mindset. The engineers and application owners, they put their apps in the environment. They don't really keep an eye on how much CPU they're consuming or storage they're consuming, because most of the time they don't get the bill, right? You move to the cloud, it is a completely different mentality. You now have an accountability to what you're consuming. And it's not just the app owners and engineers, but everybody in the organization in IT. If you're using a cloud resource, we're all responsible for those costs. So it's a huge mindset shift that has to take place. And doing the org change management assessment really helped where I came from align the people with the processes that they're going to start to hear about, FinOps, and some of the other processes that they're going to have to follow, as well as utilizing certain tools like a Cloudability or, some of the other cloud management solutions that we had in place, Kubernetes and as another example. So that org change management, and it gives you the baseline of like, okay, here's where we're at today. We're going to be over here, and this is the new landscape. Um, Here are the things that you're going to want to know. So as part of that org change management, we also wanted to showcase that, visibility into what you're spending, very, very important, because you can't refine, optimize using a FinOps term. You can't optimize what you're using if you don't have visibility into it. And then we're all accountable. IT finance has some accountability. IT procurement has accountability. The app owners, the engineers, all the way up to the VP level and the role of the CIO, right? We're all accountable for that. And when you think about bigger picture of the TBM model, if you do this right and you have the right visibility and accountability, let's say you save X millions of dollars, you can take that money and go back to the business in the TBM model and say, hey, business, how do you want to reinvest this money? And that's where you become a valued business partner. So the org change management, really, really important to get a good solid foundation.
So what's a good starting point for kind of that approach too? Because if you're going to go to an organization, like let's say I'm in a kind of a FinOps type role, and I come into an organization and I'm saying, hey, listen, you all want optimization, you want to make this change, but we have to approach that right, and with the strategy, with the plan. Is there like a framework that you've used in the past to deal with just the OCM part of organizational change management part of things outside of like FinOps recommendations and things like that?
So what we did is we established, because where I worked previously, the organization was so large, we had 3,000 plus employees that had a hand in app development, support, all of that. We built, and you'll notice the wording is was particular here. Cost custodians, not just cloud, but cost custodian. Because if you make that migration out of a data center and into cloud, you have all these assets that are being left behind, storage and servers and network ports that are being left open, and we want them to manage that end to end. So we called them cost custodians, and they were helpful because they helped drive the accountability. They raised awareness within their organizations of what we were trying to accomplish, what apps were going to move when. Hey, we got to go clean up all this stuff in the data center. Typically those things get abandoned, and you want to remove that because IT finance is like, we're not seeing the costs go down. Well, okay, we got to take the on-prem stuff off. And then, so that's just to get it moved. And then the next phase is driving all of those optimization opportunities. These people were instrumental in saying, hey, my team and the FinOps team identified those optimization opportunities, but we couldn't go execute them without their assistance. So they helped drive the optimization. We surfaced it, they executed it.
So you basically built a layer of like agents that were people that
Absolutely.
brought that visibility to the forefront and helped you build a story for it before you even started approaching the actual like allocation and FinOps strategy, right? So help me transition then. Okay. So, and folks, this is what I'm talking about, right? This was such a great story. So like we're building at the highest level here, right? Starting with that visibility as the migration is going on and approaching organizational change management by building a story first, right? And looking at the data, finding what you've got and understanding how those transitions are being made. So Kevin, walk us into the FinOps strategy, right? How did you start to transition from that to building a FinOps practice?
Okay. So what I did is I said, hey, we need to have a team, a central team to manage this environment, but we need these cost custodian to be our agents within to the business IT business units. So um, it's all about collaboration and making sure that we're working together. We have a common goal, so we set up goals and objectives and KPIs, which was very, very important. You can't showcase and measure if you don't have a goal and objective, right? So those were important. They helped us build those KPIs and OKRs, if you will. The other part that was very important to me was making sure that they got credit for the work they did in their particular space. So I'll use our security vertical, if you will. They had a group of users, three cost custodians that I mentioned, and they presented to the VPs, here's what I did this month. This is what we did to optimize the environment. The environment runs more efficient. It's secure. We saved this amount of money. They got the credit for the work that was done. I was just the facilitator with a team of people that were engineers and understood the financials. And if there was a challenge related to right sizing or buying RIs, my engineering team was there to help as a safety net to help them execute. Again, we couldn't push the button, but we could show them how to do it. Our IT developers and engineers, they didn't go to school to be finance people. And now we're telling them, you have to watch your costs in the cloud. This was like, I didn't go to school for that. I don't know how to do this. So we actually did lunch and learn sessions, partnering with finance to make sure that they were comfortable in understanding how to do a budget, how to forecast, what is a forecast. If I go over, how do I do a session with my financial analyst to find an offset for those charges? That was number one, big learning for the organization. And we were there to support them on that journey as well. The second thing is we built a cloud community of practice, and the FinOps team would present. I think we hosted that like twice a month for an hour. We would present a selected topic at the first 10 to 15 minutes of that cloud community of practice, like, hey, what's an orphaned resource and why is it important to shut that down? Well, there's costs associated. There's a security risk because I abandoned that thing and it's still running. And Who knows what's running on it? So let's go shut them down. But then the latter half of that call was the engineering and app community where they could come in and talk about the great things that they were doing to improve their code so their apps ran more efficiently in the cloud. And it became a way for them to share knowledge across various teams like, hey, Hunter, I wrote this code. You might be able to use it too. Let me put it in a repository where you can potentially apply it, right? So that was very successful. We would have 500 to 600 people out of 3,000 IT employees on those cloud community of practice calls at any given time. So very successful.
That's awesome. That's really, really fantastic. So it's kind of like it almost is like bringing the CCOE down to the next level to build in that corporate buy-in, that team ownership of
Yep.
cloud, and that's really cool, man. I really like that. So let's talk about OKRs and setting goals with people and kind of the nuts and bolts of the goals here too for the organization. Because like we talked about, the organization, the OCM approach, and getting buy-in and building kind of a community around this change that's happening and getting people to understand their incentives. How how did you, for different people, work? Because you've got people on finance teams, right? People that are specifically dedicated to what you've got going on in this instance, but you've also got your engineers and your company stakeholders and other people. What kind of goals did you set for different people in the organization, and how did you go about that?
So we looked at inform, optimize, and operate, kind of the big landscape. So let's start at the inform level. What information is important for people to make those timely, effective business decisions? Well, making sure that we understood our tagging coverage was one. So what we did is we put things in buckets. Asset utilization or change management was a big one. Purchasing efficiency. So this played in with our IT finance people and our procurement staff. And then just transparency, basically, anomaly detection, variance reporting, provided that transparency. So we had probably a dozen KPIs and OKRs that we followed. And we looked at those and said, okay, like asset utilization, uh, tagging coverage, how much what storage are we consuming versus unconsumed? Is there an opportunity to right size that, right? Um, Asset utilization. Are we effectively implementing all our right sizing recommendations? That comes into both to optimize the environment as well as reduce the cost. Board change of management, how many people are engaged, things like that. And then the purchasing efficiency. Are we buying RIs? What's our coverage of RIs and service savings plans versus just, your day-to-day run costs? And that showed, did we have the right contracts in place? Hey, procurement, we tend to buy these 15 to 20 virtual machines all the time. Let's go negotiate a better price on those versus something we don't even use in the organization. And then the transparency, like I mentioned, the variance reports, providing just dashboarding so that people could go make better decisions on running their app in the environment. So that's how we kind of built those KPIs and OKRs. And then we measured them every month. We had, measurement targets that we were looking at, like, tagging. I'll use that as an example. The goal was to get to 99+% tagged. When I left the organization, we were at 99.2% tagged, which was great because now that things are tagged, now I can go show Hunter and the rest of his team, here's what you're spending your money on. Here's your consumption. Without those tags, it's hard to show that visibility, right?
Sure.
And go back to the key principles: visibility, accountability, collaboration. Those were the key principles that we kept drilling on.
And then you've obviously got kind of this from the like the last phases of FinOps, right? The operational kind of going back and adjusting and updating allocation, right? Can you talk about kind of the continuous operations of all of this?
Sure. So it was, as we moved to Kubernetes from standalone VMs, is there an opportunity there? Does it make sense for these applications? So this really gets into the operate phase. And how do we shift them in that? Again, another cultural mindset like, oh, I'm used to my own VM and now you want me to be in a container with other people? Wait a minute, right? So there's that org change management element just always keeps reverberating back as you move through the different stages of the FinOps, from inform to operate to optimize, you know,
And I've watched, I mean, again, having known you for several years and like watched some of this happen from the sidelines, I can attest to y'all's ability to like get to even building out some unit economics metrics and really not just looking at like right sizing of resources, but like when is it efficient to turn them off and surfacing that data for different people. And then like, I've watched you all kind of build out a more mature allocation of your cloud program costs and kind of the things that the focus specification are touching on now, where it's like, hey, not only really getting into the nitty gritty details of all the services that are coming out of the different cloud platforms, but looking at, other cloud costs as well to be able to get more of like a fully burdened cloud cost that can be allocated out. um, it just keeps going, right? It is not a project that you can, and that's one of the reasons that it's organizational change. It's not project management. It's a continuous thing. And again, why fundamentally FinOps calls it a flywheel, because it starts big and slow and it just keeps getting faster and faster and faster as things evolve, right?
right? Yeah,
So, um, what are the biggest takeaways from these implementations that you've done, and specifically the one we've been talking about from your most recent employer? Um, and that matured, like what if you could pick out maybe a handful of pieces of advice to give to folks that are listening, what would you tell them? And what are the big things to focus on as things start to mature once they kind of build that practice?
sure. Uh, right out of the blocks, do that org change management assessment. Make sure that everybody is engaged. Have a good executive sponsor, and make sure that the teams include finance, engineering, security. We always leave security out of the mix. They were on our direct team constantly. I had a security engineer that worked on my team. If we didn't know the answer, we went to the broader security org to get the help. But at least we had security representation. So making sure that the org knows, hey, what are the goals and objectives, right? We want that visibility. So we got to have good tools that provide that visibility to understand what we're spending. Make sure that you have the good tagging in place. Without the tags, you can't see what you're consuming. Um, Making sure that people understand, what does accountability mean, right? And this is the culture shift from on-prem, set it, forget it, to it's running in the cloud. I'm responsible for the costs of that. And I should understand when my variable spikes might be for business, anomalies, for example, that we had mentioned earlier. So that's number one. Second thing is, make sure you have a good, strong FinOps team with a variety of skills. I was so fortunate to have very talented technical engineers, a person who reported to me that was outstanding with finance and helped with the budgeting. And we partnered with IP finance directly all the time. So that good, strong team, and making sure that your partners, the app owners, the engineers know, hey, we all don't know this space. This is new for everybody. We're here to partner and help you, not, throw it over the fence. And then you go, I'm not going to go do my optimization or get rid of that orphaned resource. Um, the next thing is, we did every year a maturity assessment, and you guys were involved in helping us with that along the way. That helped us understand, how are we doing? Year over year, were we getting better at what we said we were going to do? And it also helped us build that strategic roadmap for the next year, and we broke it into quarter by quarter, like what's important this quarter and how will that help us down the road was very, very important. I think helping people get educated in this space was very important. We let people come and take the FinOps certification. I had engineers that took the certification, the full certification. I had engineers and app owners and IT finance and procurement take the 1 hour training just so they understood the jargon and, the basics of FinOps. That was very, very important. And we tracked that. We had, 38, when I left, 38 certified FinOps certified practitioners, and most of them were app owners and finance and engineers. My whole team obviously was, but the broader organization. So that education was very helpful because it drove the enablement within the program. broadly, and then develop those KPIs. Sit down with the broader group. What's important? Finance wants to cut the budget. Okay, what's our budget cut number? 10%, 5%? Let's factor that in. What are we going to do to meet that requirement? As well as how are we going to go after things that we might need to improve efficiency on, like getting rid of orphaned resources, or, hey, I'm running these VMs, but I only run them 30%. Is there an opportunity to buy a smaller VM? Or, just look at the landscape and better understand what we're consuming, hence the visibility. So those would be the key things that I would recommend. And then make sure that you're promoting this within your senior leadership so that they understand, hey, this is what we're doing to make the environment more efficient, more cost effective, and more secure.
All right, that's amazing. So this is really, really great, solid nuts and bolts, meat and potato conversation, Kevin. I really appreciate you coming on today. Do you have any final words before I thank you for your time and send you on your way, man?
Nope, it's thank you for having me. It's great to share ideas and stories. I love helping my customers internally now that I'm on the Appio side.
Sure.
So it's great to share those stories, and thank you again for the invite to participate today.
All right. Yeah, you bet, Kevin. Well, take care. Thanks again for your time. And everybody, we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.